She only came to her grandmother for her inheritance, but never thought this would happen. For many people, their own family represents by far the most important thing in their life. However, not all people have a harmonious relationship with their relatives. Often, a person's greedy character only becomes apparent when it comes to inheriting the legacy of a deceased family member. Today, we will tell the story of Sarah and her granddaughter, Beatrice. The relationship between the two women had been broken for a long time. Now we'll find out whether fate intended to bring the grandmother and grandchild closer together again. Have fun. Sarah's greedy relatives. Sarah was poring over some documents at her desk when suddenly there was a knock at her front door. The elderly lady was so engrossed in her work that she initially completely ignored the steady drumming. However, as it continued to pound on the door, Sarah finally rose from her chair and with clumsy steps made her way to the entrance of her small house. When the elderly woman opened the door, however, there was already no trace of the person who had been pounding against it only moments ago. After looking around, Sarah noticed an envelope that someone had left on the doormat. Inside was a document that dealt with the last will and testament of her recently deceased husband, Jorge. In his will, he had stipulated that part of his estate would pass to Carla, the couple's daughter. In the letter inside the envelope, Carla's daughter Beatrice announced her upcoming visit to Sarah, during which she planned to take care of the bureaucratic matters of her mother's inheritance. Sarah sighed heavily after reading the note carefully. It broke her heart that her relatives turned to her so frequently now that her beloved husband, Jorge, was dead. During his lifetime, none of the other family members had even entertained the thought of paying the elderly couple a visit. So, a few days later, there was another knock at Sarah's door. This time, there was a young woman on the doorstep with a small suitcase in tow. Without greeting her grandmother, Beatrice went inside the cozy cottage. Purposefully, she strode into the living room, where she took a seat on the sofa and looked around the room disdainfully. It may be true that Sarah and Jorge's home was not one of the most ostentatious in the city. However, it had served as a harmonious home for the happy couple for many decades. When Beatrice noticed that Sarah had also come into the living room by now, she said to her grandmother, "Your house looks pretty beat up. If you ask me, it urgently needs to be spruced up." Sarah then became quite angry. "It's sad enough that you and your mother never come to visit, but please don't disrespect me too." Instead of a reply, Beatrice only let out an angry snort. Finally, the young woman put her feet up on the coffee table and said, "You're right, Grandma. My only concern is to organize my mother's inheritance. I will try to come to terms with the fact that I now have to spend a few days with you." After these words, the elderly lady felt a twinge in her heart. "Don't worry, my child. You will receive my husband's inheritance. But as long as you are here in my house, you must please abide by my rules." Beatrice chewed her gum with great boredom and put on her headphones. A little later, the disrespectful young woman looked around the rest of the rooms in the house until she finally reached Sarah's desk, where some of the documents the older woman had been dealing with a few days ago were still lying around. These were some informational flyers about a facility called Autumn Paradise, a retirement home in the area. "Are you thinking of moving to a retirement home, Grandma?" asked Beatrice, laughing uproariously. Sarah blushed and snatched the paper from her sassy granddaughter. "It's none of your business," she said in a hushed voice. Sarah's caring attitude. When night fell, Sarah retired to her bedroom. A few hours later, however, she woke up and wanted to go to the kitchen to get a glass of water. On her way there, however, she noticed that Beatrice had fallen asleep on the couch in the living room. Although the granddaughter had been extremely disrespectful to her grandmother, Sarah's heart softened at the sight. Since it was a very cold night, the elderly lady fetched a thick blanket from a chest. which she gently spread over Beatrice. The young woman woke up the next morning and was amazed to find that her grandmother had prepared an inviting breakfast on the living room table. In disbelief, she let her eyes wander over the steaming coffee, the homemade muffins, and the various types of bread. With no sign of Sarah, Beatrice sat up, alone, at the table, and began to eat. About an hour later, the elderly woman returned home laden with several grocery bags. Hesitantly, Beatrice began to speak. "Thank you for breakfast. It was very tasty." Sarah paused for a moment and said, "You're welcome." Then she went to the kitchen to put away her groceries. Later, Beatrice was gripped by boredom, so she joined her grandma on the couch, where she was watching her favorite TV show. However, the young woman wordlessly grabbed the remote control and started looking for another channel. At this, her grandmother's face flushed with anger. "This is my house and my TV," she shouted. "You can't just do whatever you want here. You're just like your mother. After she met your stepfather, she never showed her face around our house again. You are a selfish pack and now comes crawling to dust off the inheritance." Beatrice had not expected this outburst of anger from her grandmother. At the same time, she now began to understand how Sarah and Jorge must have felt over the past few years. "I understand, Grandma. I have been selfish, and I will treat your property with respect in the future, but please remember that I am not responsible for my mother's decisions." Beatrice changed. For the next 2 weeks, the two women did not speak a word to each other. Finally, the day came when Beatrice became ill. The young woman complained of headaches and high fever, so she spent most of her time lying on the sofa to recover. Although Sarah was still very upset with her granddaughter's behavior, her big heart would not allow her to leave Beatrice alone with her situation. She put wet cloths on the young woman's forehead, got medicine from the pharmacy, and cooked invigorating soups for her. Beatrice knew how compassionate and selfless these gestures of her grandmother were. With tears in her eyes, she said, "Why are you taking such care of me when I've treated you so badly?" "It doesn't matter what happened in the past," Sarah spoke. "You belong to my family, and the same blood runs through your veins. I cannot sit idly by and watch you suffer." After a few days, Beatrice had recovered from her severe flu. She awoke early in the morning and immediately set about preparing a delicious breakfast for herself and her grandma. Sarah, who had heard the sounds coming from the kitchen, was amazed to see her granddaughter at work. "Good morning, Grandma," Beatrice spoke in a good mood. "Why don't you sit down at the living room table? I'll be ready in a moment." Thereupon, the two had breakfast together. It was the first time they had sat across from each other in a completely harmonious mood. "I want to thank you for taking such great care of me these past 2 days," Beatrice finally said. Sarah was deeply moved by this, but before she could answer anything, there was a knock at the front door. It was the letter carrier handing Beatrice a letter from her grandmother. The young woman secretly opened the envelope. Inside, she found a note from the retirement home where Sarah had applied for a place. The document said that the home would provide a place for the elderly lady. Without hesitation, Beatrice tore up the letter and disposed of it without Sarah noticing. "Who was at the door?" the grandmother finally asked. "No one," Sarah lied. "Just someone who got the address wrong." The weeks passed, and what no one would have thought possible a few days ago happened. The two women approached each other. Beatrice helped her grandmother wherever she could, took care of the household, and went shopping regularly. One day, Sarah could no longer help her feelings. She wrapped Beatrice tightly in her arms and told her how glad she was for her help. When Beatrice returned from shopping the next morning, she saw Sarah about to get into a strange man's car. "Where are you going?" the young woman asked, puzzled. Sarah explained that the man was an employee of the nursing home where the elderly lady wanted to move in. After receiving no response to her letter, the home's management called Sarah to make an appointment for a visit. When Beatrice heard these words, tears welled up in her eyes. "Grandma, Please don't leave me. I want to stay with you and take care of you. You don't have to move to a retirement home." So it came to pass that Beatrice moved permanently into her grandmother's house. The inheritance passed to Beatrice's mother as planned. However, the young woman continued to stay by her grandmother's side. With each passing day, the two became more inseparable. What is your opinion about this heartwarming story? Feel free to leave us a comment below. See you soon.